I will call this meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. Before we get started on the agenda, I am going to pass around some beautiful bookmarks, and they are from the art specialists at Horace Mann Roosevelt Madison. Thank you for all for supporting the arts. Here are some bookmarks for your summer reading. The artwork on the bookmark was inspired by the 1980s graffiti artist Keith Haring. Fifth grade artist Shaylee Fletcher from Madison Elementary did the painting on the front. Inspiring art quotes are on the back. Thanks again for all your support. So I will send those around. What a treat. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to make one change, actually two changes to the agenda before we approve it. One is the addition of an HR addendum to be added 5B. And planning would like to request that we remove item 6B, the bus contract renewal, because we still have a little more work to get done on that.
Second.
Okay. The amended agenda has been moved and seconded. Any questions? Okay. All those in favor of moving forward in that manner, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no. All right, we have a new agenda. Nobody has signed up to address the board tonight, but welcome to everybody who is watching us at home on TV. Staff reports. Looks like we have our FEA representative substitute here tonight. Laura? Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Yep, I'm Laura Haugen Christensen. I teach English at Davies High School, and I am the vice president. Busy time of year, we have softball and all sorts of other things going on. Our biggest exciting thing right now is, of course, the negotiations, which we hope will draw to a successful conclusion soon. And that's it.
Thank you, Laura. Let's see here. Where would you like me to start? Should we start with, okay, Dr. Gross?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Dr. Agri?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
And Mr. Leeds?
Madam President, members of the board, a couple of items for you. You may have seen one of these announcements, but I'll bring them to your attention anyway. As you know, we've had two resignations in the business services area. One is Cheryl Lehman, the current Director of Human Resources, and you may have seen the announcement. We have hired Brittany Nichol, who is currently the Associate Director of Human Resources at NDSU. Has been there for 15 years in a variety of roles in the HR department. She will be joining us on or around the 15th of June, doing some work with Cheryl and getting ready to take over in that capacity. We also, as you are aware, are losing to retirement Marianne Smith, who takes very good care of me in her role, as well as work she does with the board. And she'll be missed greatly as well. And we went through an interview process and have hired Jolynn Schmid. Jolynn is currently the benefits coordinator in the Human Resources Department here at Fargo Public Schools. She has very similar experience to Marianne's position in her former role at Oak Grove, which she came to us from. And so we're very excited about that as well, and that position will be transferring over sometime between now and June 19th, which is Marianne's final day. So those are two things that have happened in my area, and certainly two positions that work closely with many of you on the board. Also, Dr. Schatz, do you want me to give the report on the reunification today, right now, or do you want to do, okay. The district today did a reunification drill, and what that really means to us is we did an exercise where we used our emergency preparedness team here at the district office to simulate an accident which would require us to lock down CBE, Carl von Nielsen, and relocate all the students from CBE to South High, and then reunify those students with parents. We did this simulation this afternoon. We actually completely evacuated CBE. We did take them to South High. We worked very closely with several partners in the district, including Valley Bus, the police department through our SRO program, FM Ambulance was involved, members of Cass County Unified Response were involved, and really an exercise to practice what would happen if we had a situation where we had to evacuate a building, relocate those students, and then go through the exercise of reunifying those students with their parents. And so it was a very successful drill. I think it's good practice for the district. It gives us an opportunity to do some dress rehearsals, you might say, of situations that could be needed within our environment. We transferred over 800 students from CBE to South in a very timely manner. We were able to get them in the gymnasium at South. We had a team from the district office available at South to help with the check-in process. We had the team from South as well as the team from CBE there to manage both the students from CBE and the facility of South, and really just feel like it was a great drill all the way around and very successful. Following that, I did do two interviews, one with WDAY and one with KVLY, really just debriefing how did it go, what did you learn from the exercise, et cetera. Just prior to the meeting here, we did debrief at South High with all the parties that were involved, and for the most part, everybody was just very happy with the drill and thought it went very well, and certainly you can always learn some things, but we also were very proud of the systematic effort that it takes to carry that out and pull that off. So I think good for you to know that it was successful, and it's something we'll continue to learn from, and probably schedule one a year of a similar exercise like this, so we can do it at different schools, different locations, things of that nature. With that, I'll take any questions if you have them.
Linda?
What is the planning process like for something like that? Who's involved and who kind of directs that? And depending on what building something might happen, does everybody in every building know what to do? It's fascinating. I've never seen something like that.
The safety portfolio for the district falls under business services, and Jim Free is really our point person in facilities for that exercise. So Jim set up the exercise and worked with all of our partners to really kind of spell out when we'd be doing it, how it would work, et cetera. And then it really, every building goes through training about what would they do if there was a situation at their building. And so they do a variety of, they've got lockdown procedures, they've got a variety of things. And everybody has really been trained on this same type of thing. If you had to evacuate, what would that look like and how would you do it? So each building has their plan. They review it with Jim, so everybody has a systematic approach of how to do this. And then when we put this exercise together, we really simulated it from the initial call from CBE that said, this was the example today, funny because where are the train tracks, but there's been a train derailment near CBE, there's a chemical spill, we need to evacuate the building immediately. So that call comes to the district office, Jeff gets on the all call and says, emergency response team, report to his office, that's the command center. He dispatches the team, so we have a team go on site to the building that's there. The principal at that building with his team, and you've heard Jeff talk about emergency response teams at buildings that include all of their administrators, their counselors, their administrative support, all of their teachers, everybody in the building. In this case, Brad Larson really did the command at that site. I was at that site to be the communication link between that CBE and the command center here. Jim Free and a team, Todd Olson is the leader of the reunification team, gets dispatched to South and is there waiting for all the students to come. We set up tables and computers so that we can bring parents in, we check them in, we make sure that, yes, David Paulson is here to pick up this student, yes, you're on the list, we're able to release him to you, we check them in, they get escorted down, we find their student, we match them up, we carry them out. So lots of moving parts, had great planning on South High's part, on CBE's part, Jim Free coordinating the effort, the district office emergency response team, which is kind of the command center for the whole piece, communicating with Valley Bus, so they knew you've got to get drivers, you got to get buses, you have to be at the site, FM ambulance in case we would need them. I mean, just really coordinating with all those bodies. And in a situation like this, each of them have their own procedures of what they would do. But interestingly enough, the command, so Todd Olson's the command in control at the reunification, the principal at the building that we're going to, Dr. Schatz here, and those three people are really calling the shots and directing the traffic for everything that happens. Then if we get into a situation whether it be with media, whether it be with, you know, any type of criminal things or stuff of that. We work very closely with Fargo PD, Jeff and whoever would be the appropriate person at Fargo PD would be handling it at the scene itself. And so lots of coordination and really years of planning of, let's get a plan. So if this happens, we're ready. And we tested the plan and we feel like it went very well.
Becca?
How about the part where the students were brought back together with their parents? Can you talk about that?
I can. We did not use parents because, of course, we did it from 12:30 to about 3 o'clock, and so you aren't always going to have parents available. But we utilized the drama students from South High. They were phenomenal, and they acted the part. They were very, very good. And so we gave them each a card. They were a father, a mother. They, you know, we gave them an actual student. They were to come and check in. And so how that procedure works is they have an initial check-in. In this case at South, parents all come in the south door. They have an initial check-in, and they verify that, yes, you're allowed to pick up this child. We then have a runner, we call them. So it might have been Mary Ann Smith takes that parent, walks them to the check-in point. We announce the name, Brock Leitz, your parents are here, please come to the check-in. A runner from CBE who knows the student grabs the student, brings them to the check-in, runner brings the parent, we bring them together at a mutual door, we escort them out the back door, and that continues to happen. Parent to child, until you get them all through. For the purposes of this drill, we reunified 25 students just to simulate how it would work. Certainly, if we were reunifying 800 students and anywhere from 600 to 800 parents, depending on how many are coming, you know, certainly that would create some challenges, but you have to try it. And that process went well. The South High drama students, I just can't reiterate how very good they were carrying out some of the emotion and the passion that where is my child and I need to see them, and it was great. So, but it went very well.
Okay. John?
Just a peripheral question for you, Brock, or Dr. Schatz, maybe more directly. This building's right next to the railroad tracks. Do we have a modified new emergency plan for our administration, given the issues of train safety?
We meet here at the DO. We started meeting twice a year to go through command center type protocols, those types of things. We have done a couple of drills here in this building too. Evacuate, get out of the building, you know, relocate, that kind of stuff. So we do have plans. I think the best thing about all this is that Jim has done a great job in the last couple of years of really developing these plans, reviewing them, testing them, going through. We have all of our schools now really being held accountable to make sure they're doing their 9 drills and making sure that they're practicing all these things. And today was the first time that we really tried a district-wide kind of a drill, and I was real pleased with it. The beauty of our security cameras is that we had all of this up on my big screen in my office, and you can watch everything that's going on too. And we have a series of different phones that are set up specifically for emergencies with lines that are specifically tied to the event, along with other types of communication modes. And so today we were testing out all of those different things and how they work and the communications back and forth and things. And then we had somebody that was recording the event within my office as far as what did we see that we liked, what did we see that we maybe want to adjust and that kind of thing. So overall I thought it went very, very well. So obviously it's simulated, so it's staged. People knew what was going to happen. I think down the road we have to try to do maybe a few that are a little bit less staged so that we get used to that emergency, you know, people not expecting it so much, so that see if we can follow protocol. But overall, I mean, when you're moving 800 kids, plus you got to remember there's over 100 adults, probably over 250 adults involved with this when you look at staff from the DO, South, CVE, coordinating. I mean, there's a series of computers set up for check-ins. It's not like one station, it's like 10 different stations. They really did the whole thing today. So it was fascinating to sit and watch all of that going on too. So it was good, and I'm glad that we've done that as a district. So.
Very good. Brock, did you have any other reports?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anne Marie?
Nothing today, thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Schatz?
Only report I have for you is strategic planning. We just didn't get things together quick enough and at a point where I wanted to bring it to you tonight, so we've put that to the next meeting. We will get that bundled up and out to you, and with the intent of you reviewing it prior to coming to the meeting, and then come to the meeting and have some discussion of, an opportunity for a little bit of, I'll do a presentation, and then opportunity for you to give feedback, and hopefully we can get that to a point where we can bring it back the following meeting where we're saying, it's good to go, let's move forward. So you should see that coming to you soon, and we'll have that discussion next time. That's it.
Thank you, everybody. Next item is the consent agenda, and we have an HR addendum. I would entertain a motion. Jim?
I move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum added to it.
Okay, been moved and seconded. I see no hands. All those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. Thank you. On to the business section of our agenda, the budget assumptions, and it looks like Mr. Johnson will lead us through that on member number 125.
I don't think I'll do all the leading, but I'll do the introduction. This is obviously a long, drawn-out work of progress done by Brock and a number of other people in the district. Planning's been involved at different junctures, just to kind of make sure we know where we're heading, and Brock has us to bounce ideas off of. And of course, now that the legislature has finished up their work in Bismarck, and the city, as of last Thursday, gave us an update on what they think our property tax valuation numbers are going to be looking like. We are pretty close to having most of the revenue side of the district figured out. The one component that is never easy to forecast, of course, is what might happen on the federal side of things with federal grants that we are yet to see the final numbers on those. But the good news is it appears that we are going to, from a state and local perspective, have about $7.8 million in new dollars coming into our district for next year. That will obviously help to take care of some of the initiatives in our strategic plan. Obviously, a lot of it will go to rewarding our employees in terms of salary and benefits. Just a couple of global overviews from what we've seen at planning and the process, and then I'll have Brock kind of walk you through the numbers that his team's worked with. We, as a board, have given a charge to our administration to bring us a balanced budget each and every time we look at a budget. And of course, that will be the end result of what we'll be seeing, and hopefully, I'm guessing the second meeting in June for final approval or first approval, either then or at our meeting in July. And then we'll actually finalize that approval process either at the end of August or early September, so we can send it over to the county for certification. On the revenue side of things, we're really at the mercy of Bismarck. We're somewhat at the mercy of what property values do in Fargo. And as I said, on the federal side, it's a crapshoot each and every year to see what they're going to fund and at what levels. But we're getting close to thinking we know what our revenue numbers look like. On the expenditure side of things, there are a couple of huge items left outstanding still that Brock and his team need we as a board to do our work, and then there are a couple other components that have to take place after we finalize our work with the teachers. But we started this process this year by really trying to identify what are the fixed expenses that are pretty well known and what we would anticipate for increases. And in the budget memo that you got, you'll see that Brock identified several broad categories and put a factor of increase on those categories. Employee benefits, purchase services, student transportation, utility costs. Obviously, there are going to be additional costs bringing EdClap online this fall, and with that will also come some additional staffing costs, not just at EdClap, but also in preparation for Eagles coming online a year later. So we had those as kind of fixed placeholders, knowing that we'd see some increases in those areas that were going to be having to be dealt with whatever new revenues we got. And that has been estimated to be approximately $2.4 million, actually 2.482, so almost 2.5 million of increased and fixed expenses. The biggest component of the district is clearly salary and benefits. We address some of the cost of benefits in that analysis of fixed expenses. Once negotiations is finalized, and as I'm sure Linda will report on later, we think that might be as early as later this week. If all things go, as we would all like, we will at least have determined the component increase for our certified staff. And then there is a process that goes on as well, administratively, for looking at all of the other employees of the district, which are approximately 45% of our total employees. So once those two components are done, we'll really be in a position to see what does the final operating budget, really what I'll call first full draft, look like. And from there, there'll be some tweaking that the administration will be looking at for what new initiatives, what areas can we increase, what areas can we redeploy from their existing budget last year. And as Brock has talked about, they really use a zero-based budgeting process now. So they start each budget cycle not with an idea of whatever we had last year, we got to increase. Instead, it's let's identify what your needs are and put a price tag to it, and then figure out where that's going to fit overall with what we can afford as a district. So I really want to tip my hat to Brock and his team, and it truly is a team. He may be the leader of that ship, and I don't have any clue how many people are on that team, but I think as it sprinkles out into the building, we're talking hundreds of our staff being involved in this budget process. And obviously, this will probably come back to planning one more time before we get the final first draft to the board for approval. But it's looking like things are going to be fairly solid moving forward based upon the revenue projections and what we anticipate for increased expenses. So I'll turn it over to Brock to really kind of hone in on numbers and share a little bit about what we're doing philosophically with the property tax component in particular, because we still don't have absolute accurate data there, but we think we have a pretty good foundation for how we've arrived at what we're estimating.
Thank you, Jim. Madam President, members of the board, I'll talk a little bit about the revenue specifically first, and we certainly, with the new funding bill, saw an increase in the per pupil aid payment. We did not see the subsequent weighted factor increases that we had hoped originally that we would, but certainly we understand that the state did the best they felt they could, and we saw an increase in the funding. Overall increases to Fargo Public Schools from a state perspective end up being about 6% each year. And so again, I think that given the current situation with revenue at the state, I think that that is pretty good for us. You'll see in the memo the current foundation aid is $90.92 per pupil. That's going up to $93.65. And so we will look at our average daily membership and calculate accordingly. You may see reports, if anybody digs deep enough, from DPI that would show a projected revenue to Fargo Public Schools slightly higher than I'm showing. And the reason for that is really the difference in projected enrollment. And in the current year that we're in right now, DPI has a projected enrollment of 180 students more than we actually have and are getting paid for in 14-15. So where they started the year versus what they're actually paying us or in that adjustment. And that's important because when you start to talk about $9,000 per student and that much difference, what they say the projection is versus what actually gets paid. And I understand how they do those projections and why they would. But just know that when I have us at 11,155 reported ADM for June 20th is when we report that, and that's what we get paid on for next year, we really feel as an administration that's a true representation of actual bodies in our schools, plus the number for the pre-K special ed that's not in some of those enrollment figures. So we feel pretty good about that. Then when you get to the weighted factors, you get to that 1241.13. So if there's any confusion about which numbers really are enrollment, the 11,155 is really about our enrollment. Those weighting factors are how the funding formula gives you some extra factor for certain things, whether it's for special ed, ELL, summer school, some of those types of things. And so that's the difference there. When we get to the property tax piece, some of you may have seen from the initial assessment department annual report that Fargo is projecting a 12.1% growth in property valuations for the city of Fargo. All of you on the board understand that Fargo Public Schools District 1 falls inside of that footprint of the city of Fargo, so we do not get credit for all of that growth or do not realize the revenue from all that growth. The projection for Fargo Public Schools District 1 within the city of Fargo is 9%. In the projections I'm using 7.5%, and the reason for that is we have about $10 million, $9.8 million, of revenue that comes in from property tax for Fargo Public Schools District 1 outside of the city of Fargo. So that which falls outside of our boundaries. That property in the far south end of the district grows traditionally at a slower rate than the city of Fargo. And so we need to factor that in. So I don't think we can, the 9% they show in their report only accounts for that city of Fargo piece. And so then we work with the county and others to determine how does the rest of that grow, and then let's meld that together. So that's how we arrived at the 7.5. So if anybody's questioning why we're doing that, that's the reason. Another thing to point out, I've assumed to this point that our mill levy stays at 139. That's a discussion that we'll have with planning, and planning will bring ultimately as a recommendation with the budget for approval, a preliminary approval in June, late June. And then as you recall, we collect approximately 95% of that every year. And you'll see, you recall in our budget that we approve, we have property tax collections from prior years, and that's if people don't pay their taxes the first year. We'll eventually get the money, it's just that we don't collect 100% of it year one. So I think we have to, certainly we have to account for that. And that's a historical average that I used, the 95%. I did not just pull that out of the air. So we try to really look at historical averages there to determine our revenue. So that's how, to Jim, what Jim referenced, how we get to the, between $7 and $8 million increase is really the combination of those factors. When we get to the expense side, and I think Jim pointed out already, the only thing I'll really, two things I'll point out there. When I looked at the fixed expenses, the categories you see there tie directly to the categories in the budget that you see. When we see purchase services, it's all of those items that we purchase through the district. Employee benefits includes everything from health insurance to FICA to retirement, all the things that are in that area. And what I typically have done there is take a 3-year rolling average and try to see what did we actually spend on a 3-year average, what does that increase look like, and then try to increase accordingly. And we continue to hone in on that as we finalize the budget. The only other thing I'll point out, because it looks like it on this sheet, and Jim touched on it, we have to finalize the negotiations with FEA and then take and apply that to our other employees. When you see net differences between revenue and expenses of $5.3 million, we will not, emphasize again, will not bring you a surplus budget of $5.3 million. That's the money that's available to finish the process on the personnel side with all of our employees in the district. So we will get to a balanced budget. That's our charge. Your ELs are on your agenda tonight that require us to do so, and we will do so. So that's how we arrived at that information. I want to reiterate something Jim said. I've got a fabulous team in the accounting department and also within each building that helps us grow our budget and build our budget. We've done much more work in the last couple years of trying to do grassroots budgeting, and I think it's important that we do that because I think if people are involved in helping develop it, they're much more accountable to it rather than me saying, here's your money, don't overspend it. So I think that's been very helpful, and I want to give credit to not only the administrative team here that works with their departments, but certainly my staff and the staff within the buildings. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
So the budget must be certified by what date?
October 10th, and so typically we would bring this to the board no later than the July meeting, hopefully the last meeting in June for preliminary approval. Between preliminary approval and final certification, if there's any adjustments that have to be made based on final certification from the city with property tax, any other final enrollment numbers, once we file all the reports with DPI, then we make those adjustments between preliminary approval and final. Also, that allows us time, if we need to do the zero mill levy notice and meeting that we're required to do by the board. You recall last year, we did not need to do that. We have not run those numbers yet for this year. We will prepare that accordingly, and we typically do that in September.
Questions for Brock? Jim, John?
Madam President, members of the board, the timeline we're facing is between now and essentially June to certify or to prepare and present our initial budget. And I want to just throw a topic out there for us to chew on and to give it our greatest thought and most rigorous debate. The notion, we've seen the history unfolding of an attempt in the state to lower mill levies. We've seen it go through now 3 legislative sessions where they're continuing on that path of lowering mill levies. We've also not long ago seen a vote of the public with regard to freezing mill levies and or affecting property taxation, because there's a sense in the public out there that that's been awry in North Dakota for some time. My caution is this, and I'll remind us, and Brock used the word assumed, but these are assumptions. And the notion of, just recently when we have the city of Fargo announcing a 12% increase in property valuations, really gets the attention of property holders. When the assumption is, there go our taxes, up 12%. But that's the assumption. We've already kicked in a process with this news where it's affecting dramatically what we feel we have to offer in our personnel side of our packaging. And I'm not saying I'm pro or con, I'm just saying I'd like to have us have a really, even if it's at planning, a very rigorous debate about this notion of balancing and or how we apply property valuation increases to mill levies. Because if you don't equivocate the increases in valuations with a decrease in mill levies, we get the public upset, some of them, and some would say rightfully so. So I challenge the board to have a very serious debate about this notion of, just because the assessors in Fargo have decided there's a 12% increase, does that mean that's what our budget increase will be, or is that the formula we use? When we were going through initial plans of this budgeting, we were at, I think, 4.5%. Now all of a sudden it's changed to 7.5%. And we could maybe go as high as 9% or 12% maybe, but not, so these numbers are given to us, and it puts us into the decision position of, well, because the valuations are increasing, does that mean we do a equivalent increase in expenditures, or do we philosophically reduce the mill levy? And I think this deserves a really rigorous debate on all of our halves.
Paul?
Just a point of clarification, and then perhaps Brock, you can fill us in on this, but I think, John, when they talk about a 12% increase in valuation, they're not necessarily talking about a 12% increase in property taxes from an individual homeowner, so much as they are talking, I believe, about increased property within the district. Is that not correct? And so while the bottom line may be the same for the city of Fargo, it's also, as Brock pointed out, a fair amount of that 12% of increased property value in the city is coming from an area that is not part of the Fargo School District. And I don't think the Fargo School District will seek to raise its expenditures commensurately with that. But I just want to make that clear, because I don't want anyone watching at home to think that their home taxes are necessarily going up by 12%. That's not necessarily the case.
John?
Paul, you bring up a good point that there is valuation growth in the district, but there are folks who had valuation increases of 25% this last year. Some people called it their love letter from the city, where generally speaking, I heard of a 10% increase for existing property owners within the city. That'd be good information to have a little more further in front of us, so that we have that delineation, I would agree, of how much is new property and how much is increases on existing properties.
And that'll matter for one more year to us.
at this point. Any other questions for Brock? Okay. Thank you for the report. Lots and lots of work behind the budget process, so we thank you for that. Next item is the ELs. I think we can take these all three together at the same time. 8 members did fill out the evaluation. We had in compliance on all pieces. There was one comment. Does anybody else wish to further expand upon those? Okay, Jim?
I'd like to move that we accept the memos for EL 7, 8, and 9 as presented in the board packet.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. We're in a business item, so I guess we need a roll call for 7, 8, and 9.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes, 7, 8, and 9 are ready to go. Thank you. Board reports. On to the National School Boards Association sharing. Looks like we have Jennifer, Dinah, Rebecca, and David. Who would like to go first? Dinah, go ahead.
I thought we were going in order as it was written, but I don't mind going first. I'm going to just highlight 2 sessions that I went to. The reason I won't mention others is because some of them overlapped with people who've already reported out or may report out. Jeff and I went to a presentation by a man named Willard Daggert. And his presentation was called Addressing Today's Challenges Within the Context of Emerging Trends. And it was a little frightening sitting there in the audience and being told how invasive technology is becoming in every facet of our lives. You know, I think we all have this conversation often about our kids or some of our kids who maybe don't take us seriously when we say, don't post this on your Facebook or don't do this, that, and the other thing on the internet because it never goes away. And they say, oh, Mom, you know, whatever. But this guy was really opening our eyes to some of the ramifications of that whole piece that whatever you post doesn't die on you. It's there forever in some way, shape, or form. And he was really talking about how school districts need to sort of pay attention to that in terms of perhaps the way we have rules about employee technology contact, what we do with our students and so on, because it's not just what we post ourselves and choose to post, but what someone can do to what you post as well, and some of those pieces, and that less is always more, and so on. So that was a big part of what he was talking about, and about being technology literate, that it's really important for all of us to, and I'm, believe me, no expert on this, to pay more attention and to really understand what we're doing with our technologies. And he was talking about how, you know, we can be tracked and our phones and, oh gosh, it's so long ago, I don't remember all the details, but I remember thinking, really? You know, it's worse than we think. So I guess my little tip to that is to pay attention to what you are doing and sometimes maybe think twice before you use the technology instead of perhaps the old-fashioned telephone or, which is not old-fashioned anymore, or the face-to-face conversation or whatever, rather than relying on the technology. He also is presented, which I don't know if you got one of these, Jeff, but I'll give it to Anne Marie. It's a conference about schools and what they've done research on model schools across the country and what pieces are that might be relevant for other schools to take note of. And there's a big conference in Atlanta at the end of June, so I'll give you that. And then the other one was one where I actually won the book at the end. So that was kind of fun, although I haven't had a chance to read it yet. This fellow, Christian Moore, talked about resilience and various types of resilience, and that our kids are living in an era where we teach them that, you know, everything they do is wonderful, and no matter what, life is wonderful, and they're never going to fail, when in fact that's not really reality, and that we need to teach them to be resilient when things don't necessarily go according to plan. He also talked about various types of resiliency. I forget all his exact labels, but for example, how you can be resilient from perhaps a bullying experience. You know, how you pull up your socks and what one can do if you happen to experience that. You get a terrible grade, you know, you're a straight A student and, you know, things don't go so well. Or you have a family tragedy, or, you know, kids react differently to these things. And we need to be, and so do adults for that matter, and we need to be more, as educators, more in tune to perhaps that, to help build that in our classrooms. That I'm not suggesting that the teachers turn a classroom and say every kid gets an A, but in a way they have to be able to encourage kids to understand that what they should be doing if they don't get that A or whatever. It's just, I'm just using that as an example. And he does presentations all over the country. And interestingly enough, he had learning disabilities and all sorts of struggles as a young kid. And so that's sort of how it's taken him into this area. And he has developed a technique of teaching kids these various resilience techniques. Needless to say, of course, he loves to go around the country and do that. And they're very on top of it. And somebody contacted me after the meeting, has already sent me a brochure, which I will pass along to Dr. Bob and Dr. Rachel, to see whether, A, we're doing anything like this, or whether this is something that would enhance what we already do for our kids. But certainly, it's stuff that's worth reading and perhaps sharing even with counselors, in terms of not necessarily stealing his program, but some of his concepts would be good things to integrate into what we already do in our counseling program. So that's it for me.
Thank you for sharing. Your technology one is kind of in alignment with one of the comments on 7, 8, and 9 about policies. And I think that's what you'd probably take out of that original technology sharing is what kind of policies do we need to establish with all the new technologies out there?
Well, and sometimes we don't know what we need until something happens.
Absolutely.
And I think that we currently have an amazing technology department in the district. And I'm sure that they think about these things as well. But I think maybe it's time that, to your point, that there's a discussion about what we put in writing in policy or in training for new staff or students or whatever, that puts a different spin on some of the ramifications of what's going on. So there.
Thanks, Dinah. Should we just go around the table? David, are you ready?
First of all, that was probably the most confusing building I've ever found in my life to try and get around in. It was huge, and there were so many meetings and so much good stuff that it was really, really difficult as a first-timer to decide what you're going to do. So the meetings that I went to were primarily focused around pay for performance, merit pay, however you want to call it. And it's always been a topic that has intrigued me. And one of the reasons is that I think the standard way, as we're finding out in negotiations right now, is most school districts have a salary schedule. which is essentially based on years of experience and the numbers of hours of credits that you achieve after graduation. And the thing I've always found unfortunate about it is that we use that because it's about the best plan we can come up with. And I've never felt that that was really the best way to be awarding salary increases to teachers. It's a simple fact that all teachers may come out of college equal. They certainly don't end up that way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be awarding Teacher of the Year every year. And the fact of a salary schedule is that essentially you show up for work, you do your job, you get a raise. And I've thought that there are people that I know and have taught with and admired greatly that deserved far more than they were making. And because of that, I think that somewhere along the line, we've got to start seriously examining paying people according to what they really achieve. Business does it, has always done it. And the real problem with that is that it requires a very, very serious buy-in from both sides. The teachers' associations have never been in favor of it until probably about 5 or 6 years ago when the National Education Association actually started talking a little bit about merit pay. There's been a lot of skepticism based around, first of all, who's going to fairly evaluate your work and what your performance is going to be based on. So I tried to go to some sessions where it was actually being used, and I think Jim was at the one that was put on by the Santa Fe School Board. And they have put a lot of time and effort into trying to come up with a 3-tiered system. And to their credit and to the credit of the entire district, they have the buy-in of the teachers, and they've really been working hard on this, and they've come up with, for lack of a better system or better name for it, a 3-tiered system essentially geared toward the good, the better, and the best. And one of the things that I think we in North Dakota would be surprised to find out is that our legislature supports education, and that's not the case in a lot of states. I think that Santa Fe said they had not seen an increase in state aid for something like 5 to 7 years. So that makes it extremely challenging to come up with any kind of a system for awarding teachers. But they had not implemented the system, they explained to us, but they were making serious strides toward it. And I only see it as a benefit to everybody involved, because it really, really gives motivation for some of the people that are struggling to make ends meet on their salary schedules. And, as a teacher with many decades of experience, I can remember very, very few years when I didn't have a summer job to supplement my income. And that's, it's kind of tragic when we tell teachers that, this is a profession, this is a career. But I am going to continue to examine the pay for performance concept, and I hope that sometime in the future, we as a board and the FEA can get involved in some preliminary talks and see what we can come up with to the benefit of everybody.
Thanks, David. Jennifer?
I like it. That was a good one. I was there too. And you're right, there were so many good ones to choose from. It was a little bit overwhelming as a first-timer. And so I just sort of had to say, all right, in reading all these descriptions, which took a very long time because there were so many options, I had to highlight what exactly, okay, I wanted to start with those that were showing dramatic increases in student achievement and how they were getting there. I was interested in gathering ideas around things that the districts were sharing that they've successfully implemented in order to improve their climate or their culture, and then how they successfully engage their communities. And so I have tons of ideas. I'm not going to share them all because we might be here for a while. I'm happy to put them in an email and send them to you, but I did learn some important things, and I'll just highlight a few if you all want to hear them. And I think that it's might be good discussion in the future, for communications, if you all agree. Maybe, who knows, some of the same things will come out of our communications audit. So anyway, I also chose districts that were similar in size to Fargo Public Schools, same number of teachers, same number of students, and diversity, as close as I could get to try and, compare apples to apples, right? And then, like I said, the ones that showed significant gains, there was Chicago, there was Santa Fe shared a few, I think, examples, there was Maine, and I have all of those, and I would assume that some of these things might be on their website as well, if it piques any of your interest, to go out and see what they're doing. But for example, things that they highlighted that were contributing to their success were building a collaborative culture with their staff, and they gave examples of how they were doing that. Their board and their superintendent or board cabinet or administrative cabinet was basically opening the doors and hosting these events, sort of like forums, open forums for their staff, to have this two-way communication. And how they started it was because, and I believe this was Salt Lake City, that said, we felt like we were doing all these things, but we still heard the same thing. They don't listen to us. They don't know what's really going on. And so how can we brainstorm and think of different ways, right? I feel like we've had some of the same conversations. So one of this unique ideas was this, and it worked out for them. They started by doing it as, for example, they used legislative issues. It's a way to educate, and so that we're all communicating the same message, so that teachers were just as informed as we are, right? This is things that we're talking about, that we're dealing with, but it's important for everyone to sort of be on the same page. But unless they're seeking it out individually, and maybe reading or gathering different information. So why not have this an opportunity to have this two-way dialogue, and give them some resources. They started there, and that was just one example. There was a lot of talk amongst all of them about instructional coaching, much like the strategist that we've all spent some time with. They really emphasized the peer-to-peer coaching and empowering your teachers and engaging your teachers. Really talked a lot about individualized professional development. Matter of fact, one of them said, we spend all this money on motivational speakers, and although they can be very entertaining and we can gather some things, they actually shared research. And this was, I think, from the Maine district. They said, this research perspective found that most teachers will not use new teaching practices inside the classroom if the only learning opportunity available to them is a one-time in-service professional development workshop. And it went up significantly when they talked about peer-to-peer. It was like up to 95%. So it was, I don't know, perhaps this is already the views of the district or of the board, but I thought it was a significant learning. And I know that one of the other districts mentioned their instructional, what did they call them? Instructional coaches, and when they were talking about strong community partnerships. And let me see if I can find it here, because they referenced their partnerships with Google and Johnson & Johnson. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be familiar, Johnson & Johnson, right? I work for Johnson & Johnson, in case some of you may not know. And there were learnings, actually, from that, obviously, that I thought were important enough to share. But if I can find it in my notes, I'll read it to you. So hang on one second. They called it Cooperative Learning Teacher Leaders. Perhaps we have this, I don't know. Maybe we don't. But even regardless, if we don't, I think that it's something that is working for some districts, right? And they certainly wanted to highlight it, but maybe it's also an opportunity for us to hear. If we do have it, maybe it's an opportunity for us to learn more about it as a board. Because at the end of the day, all of these examples went back to student achievement. And they were able, Chicago, for example, highlighted their MAP test scores and how they were in like the top 5% for both reading and math. And I think that's pretty impressive. And the common theme, all of it had to do with culture and professional development of their teachers, empowering and engaging their teachers. And that so often the theme was that there's few people at the top doing the majority of the work when it should be all of them engaged to some degree. And they talked about different ways of doing that, right? And we talked a little bit about it at communications the other day too. So let me see what else I have highlighted here for you. I have so many notes. I gathered a lot of information, a lot of good information. And so common themes I talked about. And I thought I would share just to kind of highlight, I thought it was sort of, the timing was perfect. Just the other day, I received an email from my boss, who it was handed down from his boss. His boss got it from senior leadership, and it said, the whole email, all it said was, if the people grow, then the company will grow. And it was a quote from Peter Cohan. I don't know if any of you know him, I don't know him, but the importance is that I think that companies like J&J and like Google inspire things around culture, and I know we talk a lot about that, and we're doing things about it, but I think if we could hear more about how we're doing that in the district, I think it would be beneficial. But all right, so having said that, what else do I have here to highlight for you? Oh, I thought I would just share a couple examples. So I shared with you one of the things that they're doing with their staff. At school board meetings, one of the districts said that in addition to having the Teachers Association report out, they have PTA reports. They have foundation reports. There was one of them that talked significantly about the things that their foundation, Education Foundation, does. And this one, for example, one of their reports was on a golf tournament that they just hosted, and 100% of the funds went to teacher grants. And they were talking about how these teachers can apply for grants, and they're as small as $250. Perhaps our Education Foundation does that. I mean, I looked at our website a little bit and saw that there are quite a few on there. But they talked about, but the point was, these are ways that teachers feel empowered and feel an opportunity to lead. And I know that, there's a lot of great examples of that, but the more we can highlight it, basically they were saying, the better. And if this is an avenue to do that at, we want to hear about that, or at least I do. They talked about, let's see what else I don't know if you'll like this one, Dr. Schatz, but talked about breakfast with the board and the superintendent, and provides the staff the opportunity to share highlights, anything that's happening or concerns or questions. And their superintendent cooks the breakfast and the board members serve it. So I don't know if you appreciate that or not, but I thought it was a good idea. Like, he's not even looking up. And then it reminded me of Building Bridges, where they asked us to dance, and Dr. Schatz's like, nope, not doing that. But maybe we could get him to cook breakfast. Right. And then lastly, community involvement. I'll just share a couple of highlights that they said, because again, I think it seems like we're always looking for ideas of what we can do differently or better to make our community feel like they're engaged and that we're working towards the same goals. And they mentioned tailgating, and I thought, well, how fitting. NDSU, and we're a tailgating community. They actually invite their legislators. And I don't know what you all think of these ideas. It's just an example. And it's sort of a thank you to the business leaders. We've hosted business leaders things before. I mean, it's an event. They talked about the 4th of July parade that they participate in. It's just being out there and being involved, right? And being seen. Communications talked a little bit about, and I think it was Rebecca's suggestion, there's a parade, or picnic coming up, things like that as an opportunity to just be out there in the community. And I think I'll leave the rest to summarize, or if you guys are interested in the same topic, I'm happy to provide you with more examples, and I'll certainly share them with Dinah as Chair of Communication. But I think it was a great experience. And I wish I could have gone to more of them, because there were a lot that had some good information to share. But that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Whew, Lord,
I know, I'm sorry.
that's a lot of detail. That was great. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, to build on what David said, I kind of, it was an interesting facility to find your way around in. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. It was a beautiful facility, so, from a visual standpoint, but my main worry every time I ventured to find the next session was that I wasn't going to be able to find it, and I usually wasn't able to find it. I don't know. Someone needs to get some advice on signage, I think, for that facility. But I learned that I needed to, and I think it was Jim Johnson said that maybe when you go and sit in a room, you could sit towards the back in case you decide that the topic isn't specifically for you, and then, you can go and find another spot. And thanks for the advice. But at any rate, I learned that I needed to go with the flow. The first program that I intended to go to was full, and I thought it was going to fit right in with what we have going on in our school district. Can't remember what it was on right now. It might have been Mill Levy, yeah. And it was packed. You couldn't even go in there and stand. And I thought, okay, well, what else can I catch before it's over with? And so I kind of went along that process throughout the conference, and that was actually okay. I ended up, discovering new things. So a regret that I have is that there's only one of me, because I would have been able to go to many more of them. You all might be happy that there is just one of me. I thought that Jane Pauley's opening keynote was awesome, and I tend to be a person that gravitates towards overall kind of motivational and inspirational sessions, and I like to take down a lot of quotes, and so I too took down many, many notes, but they're more broad-based, and so I wrote down 5 quotes that I think kind of have to do also with our climate and culture within our schools that we can apply. They're not really new to us, but they're good to remember. Change is the order of the day, so we talk about that all the time, whether it has to do with boundaries or budgets. Nobody can see the future, but Jane Pauley said, I'm generally looking in that direction. She was so entertaining and refreshing to listen to. She basically took us kind of through her life. It's not going to happen unless you make it happen. Inspiration is everywhere, but you have to be looking for it. And the obvious, to be moving forward, you have to be moving. So I used those, even though I wasn't able to get to every session that I originally thought I was going to. I think they helped guide me to the sessions that I did end up at. And one of the sessions I went to was the Mattering session, and I know Paul also went to that, by Angela Myers. And really, it was such a basic concept that, it's not like a 10-point message that I'm coming back with, but basically just telling the kids in our schools, the people that we work with, that we matter. And also the idea that, for example, even here at the board, we get to be at these meetings. We don't have to be at these meetings. Obviously, we were elected, but we chose to run for the position. We get to be here. We get to serve. Our teachers get to be in the classrooms to help the children. Our principals get to be in the schools to help the staff, to help the students, and it's an honor. And to be able to tell a student or a coworker, Jennifer, you matter to me. What's going on in your day can be huge for a student. The other one, I think Paul, maybe, I wonder if you were in this one, and Dinah, with the poet, Azure Antoinette. Paul, were you also?
I think I was in there, but I don't think I stayed
Her title, the title of that session, I think she did more than one, but was "You Should Know This About Me," and she was, she was just so elaborate and engaging in her presentation, and so was Angela. But she wanted to go around and find out information about people. Linda, what do you do? You might say, well, I work for the symphony. Paul, what do you do? Well, I'm a financial planner. Jennifer, what do you do? I work at Johnson & Johnson. Rebecca, what do you do? I serve on the school board. No. What do you do? What do you care about? Who are you? What makes you special about who you are? So that I as a person, or we as individuals, or teachers or principals again, or superintendents can get to know the intricacies of the people that we're dealing with so that we can better work with them. We can more effectively educate individuals. And it was really interesting because she had us put, Dinah, I don't know if you were involved in the storytelling part, where I think we had 10 minutes we had to write continuously for 10 minutes a story about whatever it was. But it was something that, I think it was, if I were going to tell you something, this is what I would tell you.
If I were honest,
If I were honest, I would tell you. Okay, if I were honest, I would tell you. And then write. And if you stopped, she would, bug you to keep on writing. And then she offered the opportunity for individuals to come to the mic and share their stories. And there were actually, at first people were hesitant to do it. I did not do it. But once people started sharing, more and more people started sharing. And people shared some really inspirational and, I think, special thoughts and stories about their lives that they maybe hadn't shared with other people already, but they felt that they were in a safe spot. And it just opened up opportunities for them to, for us as individuals too, to realize more about ourselves. Because a teacher isn't what makes you you. There's more to it than that, or being a financial planner, or working with a symphony, or the role with Johnson & Johnson, or being a superintendent. They're all the qualities that we all have that bring us to, where we are, and hopefully add value to other people's lives. The third one that I wanted to talk about was called The Immortality of Influence. And the individual was Salome Thomas. He's an inspirational teacher. All these folks are inspirational. But overall, he was just giving some examples of how, one individual can have a really big impact in a person's life. And he was talking about how he took 15 of his African-American students into a rural Vermont community where they interacted with white children their age. And at first, they looked at each other like, well, we're not the same. But their experience after the period of time that they were together was, hey, we're really the same. I mean, we have a lot in common, and it kind of reminded me of our situation that we have in some of our schools where we have the new Americans and refugees, and how we're all really one people. We might have different colored skin, we speak differently, and we come from different areas, but we're all one people, and how it's a really unique, special opportunity that, again, we have that population in our district to help us learn more. I did go to one community, kind of a parent engagement session, and I'll give those notes too or bring them to the communications committee or to Dinah, because I took probably, I took so many notes, and there probably are about 30 specific ideas of how one of those school districts was able to put together some very measurable results and action items in terms of further involving the community and parents within their schools. And I think Jennifer was going to go to that one, but you picked a different one, so our notes won't overlap on that. One that I want to follow up on is the impact of student health on academic achievement. And that was a case study. It was done by a large school district in the U.S., and I went in to it 3/4 of the session had already finished. But at any rate, I could tell even just from the last part that I was there that there was a lot of valuable information in regard to networking with health professionals, just to bring in, and nutritionists and exercise physiologists to bring in within a school district to see what we can do to help have better results on student health and academic achievement. So that is basically my summary. It was a great experience, though, and thanks to the district for allowing us to be there.
Because if the people grow, the organization grows, right? Thank you for the thorough reports. I think we can probably go through the rest of the committee and liaison reports before we go into executive session. So I'll maybe start with Jim and we'll cruise around the table.
Sure. Planning met, but we are going to be meeting again. So those of you on planning, we are going to be meeting at 7:30 a.m. this Thursday. Brock, if you'd be kind enough to have Mary Ann put out notice for that. It'll be a single agenda topic. We really want to delve a little deeper on some of the follow-up work that Brock is doing on our bus contract, or actually bus study project, in preparation of determining what we're going to do with our bus contract. SEEC had a board meeting since we last met. Nothing earth-shattering there. Got a report from our executive director after his first year being a state senator, and he learned firsthand that even if you're a state senator and you're the executive director of one of the REAs, it doesn't mean you can get anything accomplished for REAs. One of the big agenda items he had, and we are very vested in this item, was trying to get a legal structure definition for what an REA could be, so they can actually theoretically become their own fiscal agent. Well, that got introduced by Kyle, and I think it maybe even left committee, but that's as far as it got. So we are still at the same juncture point, although I do understand that there's conversation out in Bismarck between DPI and other people trying to figure out what should REAs be now that they've grown up, and in particular, because of the Succeed 2020 money that got thrown into the mix, that they are the agents to deploy throughout the state. So it's kind of interesting to hear his take on his first year experience out there. The only other thing I have to report on, it's not a committee report, but I know it's a very busy time of year for all of us with lots of school activity. I just want to remind you the most busy part of the year for school activity for a school board member comes the first week in August with the annual picnic, which means it is time for you to go out and try to find some door prize giveaways. And I'm assuming once again Anne Marie would be happy to be the holder of those if you happen to get gift certificates or any other items from area businesses that we could use for a door prize. This will be your first of many reminders.
Of course. John?
Madam President, members of the board, the GAC committee will be rescheduling from May 20th. So those of you on the committee, if you want to send a note to a good time, and it'll probably be at 11:30 if it's a Wednesday. Otherwise, we could pick another day of the week, but we'll be looking for a new date for that. Just quickly, the Native American Commission is embarking on a new effort to. I think it's really quite significant potentially. They're looking to relocate their sweat lodge facilities, and it has the potential of becoming a community destination if we could pull all of our resources together. So I think there'll be some fun things unfolding there. I know we have one location in South Fargo that's on the map, but we're also opening the doors with like the Park District and seeing if there's any chance maybe we could explore relocating that to the Trollwood, the old original Trollwood location in North Fargo. And there's some flood level issues there to consider. Or if any of you have ideas on a place in town that might fit for such a facility that could become some sort of a cultural destination learning center, we're open to your ideas.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, on April 30th, so my one update is on April 30th, I accompanied the Clara Barton Choir on their concert tour. And they went to 3 places. They performed at Hawthorne to the K through 2nd graders. And it's so fun because when the Clara Barton, the big kids from Clara Barton, the 3rd through 5th graders, go to Hawthorne, the school that most of them spent their, K through grade 2 years in. They walk into the gym and the gym feels so small to them and they can't believe that they were actually ever in that teeny tiny gym. But at any rate, and then the little kids look up to the choir and they think they're so big and they can't wait to be at Clara Barton and grow up. But at any rate, they performed at Hawthorne and then they performed to the residents at Bethany in the chapel. And let's see, a couple of the songs that they sang, Best Day of My Life, which I thought was a very, I love that song, and I thought the lyrics are very fitting for all the residents of Bethany. I think that was the first song that they sang, and I thought, I hope this is the best day of their life. And then the other song, one of the other songs they sang was The Climb from the Hannah Montana. And all the lyrics there too, I thought, well, those are fitting for every age and every stage. And they also went to Discovery Middle School and met with, I believe it was the 6th grade, one of the 6th grade choir classes, to learn a little bit about what it would be like to be in 6th grade choir. And then that 6th grade choir also sang some songs, performed for these elementary students, and then they sang together, and it was a fun time. So that's my report.
Thanks, Jennifer. What did we sing at Building Bridges? Let It Go? I got to hear Linda sing. At Building Bridges, the conference. I know, it seems like forever ago, right? But I'm pretty sure I haven't had an opportunity to share out on that one. I don't know. So anyway, they were talking, the two speakers that spoke at the opening of both days were very inspirational, but I will shorten my notes and just highlight a few things. And that is, they introduced or announced Welcoming America and its partners in Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo will be hosting National Welcoming Week, and you can find them on Facebook. Maybe some of you already know. I see some head nods. I already know of this, but it's September 12th through the 20th. And you can go on and like them and then see their updates on Facebook, or go to welcomingweek.org. So the one thing that I did that I think was very unique about how the end of the day on the second day, and Rebecca was there too and participated in this with me, they do this, what they call open space meeting. And so this is a type of meeting where participants call the conversation. I've never been involved in something like this, so it was very unique and enlightening. So the idea is that whoever comes are the right people. Whenever it starts is the right time. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have, and whenever it's over, it's over. And I thought, oh, well, this could be really successful, or it could be a huge failure with those being the rules. And I thought it actually turned out to be very successful. And matter of fact, I believe that the group we led was probably one of the largest ones. And so the idea was those that stayed could come up and sort of present a topic, and anyone that stayed and that was interested in that topic would go and join your conversation. And so we offered to host a group for, the school board and any topics that someone might have that they want discussed. There were teachers, obviously, in the audience. There were, we had New Americans there. We had folks from LSS there. And so anyway, they just shared, the group shared what things and programs they thought were working, and maybe some ideas. And so I'll just highlight a couple of them because they talked a lot about, and the folks also from LSS said this, and I'm sorry, what is the gentleman's name that hosted it? Muhi. He was in our group, and he had some fantastic ideas, and he said that there are great nonprofit organizations in our community. The need is for student groups to form. And this is where clearly our group, came into play here. So volunteer students needing to help New Americans get involved. And the student session that I attended was this panel of New Americans, and it was fabulous. They were from West Fargo, and they talked a little bit about, their experience. And the key thing was obviously learning the language and the culture differences. And the one way that they had suggested that it could have maybe been easier along their journey was that if they had friends helping them. And so clearly I saw, this is a need and an opportunity they've identified, and they wanted this to be brought back. The other thing that I heard loud and clear in terms of, so we asked for examples, like how could we do this? One teacher shared how they had a particular, I believe, a para in their building that was from Sudan. At any rate, the point is this parent was willing to volunteer their time to educate the staff and the students on cultural differences, because so often that education is given to the ELL folks, right, but not necessarily to what they said mainstream teachers get. And they said that this need is large, and these parents are willing to, a lot of them are willing to do things like this, and so they recommended that as another maybe area of opportunity. And so many of the stories that I heard, that in other cultures they are they do things in groups and as large families, and we're so individual here, and so they're happy to do that. They sort of embrace that kind of opportunity. It's just I don't know if anyone's asked, and so they found that to be very beneficial. The other thing that I heard loud and clear was soccer. Soccer. They asked, what can we do about getting soccer back into, maybe it was at some point, elementary schools? Because it's this universal sport. And it was an area or a suggestion when we asked for suggestions as to how we could, bring these student volunteers or students together. Soccer seemed to be the answer that I think almost every single student said. And when they were asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, almost every one of them had soccer player or famous soccer player, as well as physician or teacher. Every one of them. It was really fantastic to get an opportunity to hear about the journeys from the students. Some were very young and some were high school students, and just how maybe similar and also very different, and what worked and what they think could have worked better. So thank you, Dinah, for suggesting to go, because I thought it was a great conference. And then Health Insurance Committee, I did attend one of the consultants were there 3 or 4 scheduled maybe for staff? And I did attend one of them. It sounds like they were, there were some good attendance in terms of numbers across the board. And I seem to learn something every single time I go to one of those. I don't know about you, Brock, but wow. So definitely much needed, and I think very valuable, and happy to see that the district is doing that. So, and I heard good feedback from the folks that were there as well. So, so that was good, and I think that's it. Thanks.
David?
Nothing at this time.
Paul?
Nothing that I need to report.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
Negotiations teams both met Saturday morning, May 2nd, to attempt to come to agreement on the salary piece. And as I emailed you out, the FEA declared impasse. But then on Thursday, Brock got the report from the city of Fargo that said that there's more property tax. The valuation had increased, more property tax money that would be most likely coming to us. So in the interest of sharing that with the teachers, we communicated with them, asked if they'd be willing to come back to the table. So we met last night at 6 o'clock for a little over 2 hours, and came up with some different options, went back and forth a few times, and FEA took an offer back to their membership. So we have set a time for one more meeting tomorrow afternoon, because there's still one more issue on the table besides salary, which was the cap in personal leave days that can be requested on any given day. And we'll talk details of the offer when we go into executive session. That's all I have to report.
Thanks, Linda. Dinah?
Communications met also yesterday. And the gist of our conversation was to come up with recommendations and suggestions for board members' visits to schools for upcoming years. And we had some really good discussion and are going to recommend that going forward, board members do 1 to 2, preferably 2 visitations a year to the schools that they are liaison to in a given year. So it wouldn't necessarily be everybody does high school all at the same time, or everybody always does elementary or middle school all at the same time. We've all had an experience in multiple areas, and then people would be able to more tailor-make their visits with either the principal or the strategist or whoever the connected person is. And we'll formalize that in a way so that it's organized and structured so that people can do it easily. We also had quite a bit of conversation about communication role in the community, sort of partly because of what Rebecca and Jennifer had suggested from their NSBA. And we threw out some ideas, but before we get the communication audit back, we're not going to put anything in place because we feel that the audit may highlight things that the board could be doing in a communication way that we should hear what the auditor says before we, and then have more discussion about that. So unless something else comes up this year, that's sort of the end of the role of the communication committee until the reorganization of the next board. So if you guys pass all that stuff on to me, I'll gather it and appropriately do with it. Otherwise, in the last couple of weeks, I've attended several retirement parties to see some of my favorite teachers and principals leaving. I had lunch at South in their restaurant. I did attend the Finding Balance Common Core lecture that was at MSUM. I didn't see anybody else there, and it was mostly students. David Flowers was one of the presenters. I thought he did a really good job of a balanced representation and a fair representation of probably where we are as well as West Fargo on that topic. They had 2 folks that were pro Common Core and 2 that were anti, and it was strongly against, moderately against, strongly for, and moderately for. That's how they divided them up, which is kind of interesting. But I don't think there was any new information for us, but it was pretty well presented, I think, generally for the students who were there and the people who were there, and very civil and good questions and stuff. And the Board of Health meeting is this Friday. I've had to miss the last 2 because of other board activities. So as the chair, I'm going to go to that meeting this week, but I will not be at the City PTA luncheon. So I just wanted to remind those of you who probably know, and some have probably are RSVP'd, that the annual City PTA luncheon is on Friday this week. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I didn't bring a written report because it was kind of redundant. However, I will say I did visit a Chamber of Commerce legislative debrief session, and there were 5 local legislators that sat on the panel. They talked a lot about the oil money, of course, a couple things that pertain to us. Open source education, technology, and distant learning grants is going to be a big conversation going forward. They're very interested in leveraging those dollars and technology, so we have equitable education across the state. So expect those conversations in the interim. Jim Casper remains very interested in Common Core assessments. Tim Mathern talked about the importance of annual sessions due to oil forecasts, and he gave the example of we started out with 8.2 billion, went to 4.2, and ended up at 3.6. There was some conversation about how individuals can actually get away from their work for 4 months, and how some thought that was better than 2 months every year, but 4 months every other year. So there was a little bit of back and forth with that. But overall, education did play a fairly large part in that conversation, as did early childhood education. So worth my while to go to. Some of these chamber events are really good, and I think that they're starting, well, I know they are starting to take a bigger interest in K-12 education, what it does for our local economies. So if you get to any of those, I encourage you to do that. Okay, other than that, any other reports? John?
Matt, you know what's coming, don't you?
I do.
Our president's birthday is Monday, the 25th of May, so you all know.
And you can all have the day off for my birthday, because it's Memorial Day. Okay, well, let's take a break until 7:10, and then we'll come back to our meeting, and then our next agenda item is the executive session. So, see you at 7:10. We are back in session. Next item on the agenda is a possible executive session. So I would entertain a motion. Linda, sorry.
Thank you. I move that we adjourn to executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy as permitted under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1.
Second.
Okay. Do we need a? Yes. Oh,
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson. Myers,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Nelson.
yes. Okay, we will make preparation to go into an executive session. You ready? Okay, we are back in session. Our next regular meeting is Tuesday, May 26th, debriefing on the meeting itself. Debriefing. But something about everybody paying attention? Okay. Okay, we are adjourned.